on the wild side and the band kept playing.
Well, hello, weirdos.
Oh, how dare you call me that?
If you pardon me for being so familiar, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to dive deep, possibly too deep, into the gloriously strange underbelly of British rock music. Now, before you start shouting at your screen, where's Arthur Brown? What about Screaming Lord Sutch? What about Stackridge? Where are the bonzos? I've already mentioned those in previous videos, so watch my videos about Viv Stanchel and Bonzos and Screaming Lord Sutch after you watch this one. But let's get on with it. What we're going to talk about today are the unsung, the unhinged, the absolutely unfathomable outliers of British rock. Get ready as I expose Britain's most bizarre rock bands and acts of all time. And I'm going to start with John Otway and Wild Willy Barrett, who had quite a lot to do with from about 83 onwards. I can't believe I've not made a video about John Otway or Wild Willy Barrett before now, as they were quite a big part of my musical life over the years. Back in 1977, Otway and Barrett appeared live on the Old Grey Whistle Chest. In the middle of the song Cheryl, Otway decided to do some on-stage antics and leapt off his guitar amp. Unfortunately, he landed on a part of his body that was quite delicate. I can't think of the word. What's the word? They're round and spherical. I can't think of the right word. But
Cheryl is going home. Cheryl is going home. Cheryl is going home.
And it gained him instant cult status. Growing up in the market town of Aylesbury, not far from London, Otway wanted to be a star from a very early age. The only thing he lacked was musical talent. Fortunately, there was a local hero, a guitar, violin player called Roger Barrett, Wild Willy Barrett, who was brought in to join a partnership and add a bit of musical gravitas to the situation. And they created a very strange mix of punk, folk and humour. After a false start with an album produced by the Who's Pete Townsend, search it out if you're really a masochist, the pair were signed to Polydor Records and released an album called Deep and Meaningless. Mysteriously built up one of the most loyal followings in British music history. Although I did the occasional show with Wild Willy Barrett, whose organic bondage was a curious mix of music and woodworking, it was Otway who I worked with mostly over the years. For some reason, though, we could work out, Otway drew his biggest crowds at the Cricketers in the 1980s, which meant that I booked him quite a lot. Back then, he had a guitarist he worked with. Well, he had two guitarists I can think of. One was called Robin, I can't remember the name of the other one. And I put him on one of my last shows I did at Margate Winter Gardens in 2018, was it? And the guitarist is now called Richard, but the set was not that different from the set he did at the Cricketers almost 40 years ago. And that is really Otway's enduring quality, because most of the audiences are people that have seen him many times over the years, but he's such an entertainer, because that's the thing, what he lacks in musical talent, he makes up for in sheer entertainmentness.
This is also worthy of note because it's an intro which contains every single chord that John knows.
And I saw him last at a funeral of a mutual friend who was his agent, Eric Hands, about 4 weeks before I'm recording this. And he was just to say, Otway, it's got to be said, is the master of self-promotion. And he has a guy, I can't remember his name, and basically he's formed a team with his followers and supporters where they help him do things like have a second hit, and they like sell out the Albert Hall for his birthday and things like that. Bunsen Burner was a hit single 25 years after the first because he wanted it and he went out and he got it. How many failures get 2 top 40 hits and sell out the Royal Albert Hall? Answer me that and stay fashionable. As they said in, what was it, Withnail and I, wasn't it?
Answer me that and I'll tell you all you want to know.
The next person I'm talking about you may not remember because it's a guy called Duffo.
What would you put on your passport as your
Sex.
No, I don't mean that. I mean as your profession. Yes, your profession.
Well, I put entertainer, but That's a broad spectrum, because I presume that's what you'd put on yours.
No, I wouldn't put that on mine.
If you think Elton John is theatrical, meet Duffo. It's almost as if Bowie had a weirdo Australian cousin who got kicked out of mime school, because that's what Jeff Duff, aka Duffo, moved to the UK from Australia in the late 1970s. I put him on a few times at various gigs I did back then, and even became his agent for a while. His single, Give Me Back Me Brain, featured twisted synth pop with lyrics about brain damage, sexual confusion and bodily functions, and somehow felt ahead of its time. It got him on the Russell Harty chat show though, and it was played quite a lot.
I'm only just alive, but I'm still not dead.
He once described himself as a cross between Liberace and Iggy Pop, and the strange thing is that's both accurate and terrifying. Before we go any further, could I just say, you know what I'm going to say now. If you haven't already subscribed, it would be a great help to me and to you if you could please subscribe. If you like this video, please like it, share it with your friends, and comment. Let me know what you think. Now, let's get back to the weird music, shall we?
Not before time.
Who's next then? The next one we've got about is Doctors of Madness.
Oh, Billy, watch out, there's a weird seems addict about.
Doctors of Madness were punk before punk. These guys were mixing glam, art rock and existential dread a good 2 years before the Sex Pistols spat on their first bourgeois cream cake. Led by the enigmatic Richard Kid Strange, their theatrical shows and dystopian lyrics influenced everyone from The Damned to Julian Cope. They had violin solos, silver face paint, and songs about mental hospitals and state surveillance. And the next one we're going to talk about is Jilted John. Gordon is a moron were 4 words that got Graham Fellows, that is who it was, a top 5 UK hit in 1978.
Just like I asked her, Gordon, she replied, not that punk, I said dismayed.
The song is basically deep heartbreak filtered through the mind of a spotty schoolboy. But behind the joke was a very clever parody of punk tropes. Fellows would go on to create John Shuttleworth, do you remember him? Another cult comic musical legend, and he previewed him, I remember, at the Cricketers, because Jilted John, aka Graham Fellows, played at the Cricketers quite a lot, and Graham really milked Jilted John for everything it was worth. There were follow-ups, Gordon and Julie, they did a single in reply, and there was a concept album, all kinds of things. And back then, the Cricketers, it was the venue I was in involved in, it was only the Oval Cricket Ground in South East London. Cricketers was, even though I say so myself, was quite unique because we used to put on all kinds of different things, and I always used to enjoy comedy stuff. Like we had a lot of the Bonzo people play there, and we had that kind of humour and Basil's Balls Up Band. But I like that kind of thing, and I like to bring the punky side of comedy into it. And we had people like Mark Steele who did early gigs there, and a lot of early comedians started off doing supports at the Cricketers. And I believe that Mark Lamar was called Mark My Words in those days. Is it Mark My Words? I can't remember now. So it was that kind of place. But let's go on now. We've done Jilted John and Graham Fellows, so let's talk about Chris Sievey, Frank Sidebottom's alter ego.
Aren't Scouts fantastic and brilliant? They're the milk, aren't they? Hey!
Chris Sievey tried for years to be a pop star. I think he had a single called Who Was the Girl in the Virgin Checkout, blah, blah, blah.
I'm in love with the girl on a certain Manchester megastore checkout desk. Beats me. The Freshies.
He even encoded a video game which he put on a single. I think it was on a cassette, I can't remember exactly. But if you played it to your computer, it would basically play a video game. So it's all very high-tech back when there was low-tech. But it wasn't until he stuck a massive papier-mâché head on and started talking in a nasal, whiny voice, which he achieved by using one of those clips that swimmers use to make his voice sound different, well, sound like Frank. And this was what Frank Sidebottom was. And this is where Frank found his true calling, or Chris found his true calling through Frank, because Chris became Frank. This is the thing. I've done a video about it, and there's a link up there somewhere. When Chris put on the thing, you couldn't call him Chris, you had to call him Frank, because he wouldn't respond as Chris. So it was all very surreal. It was strangely innocent and completely baffling to most people. Like, I remember the landlord of the Cricketers never got it at all. It was so baffling that Michael Fassbender ended up playing him in the film. What's he called? Frank, was it? I can't remember now. Well, a version of him, actually, basically, because he was obviously American. And Frank largely developed at the Cricketers, to be honest with you. Sometimes he was on twice a week, sometimes he was on once a month. It was like constantly, for a period of time, it was for Frank. And since then, the Manchester music mafia have hijacked the whole thing. And the Cricketers and myself, because I played a bit of a part in it, has been written out largely thanks to a guy called John Ronson, the writer and broadcaster, who basically was in the band for a while. He actually came down to the Cricketers to audition for Frank's band. In his book, he says it was at his own gig at Central London, Poly or whatever, but it definitely was at the Cricketers. And I think he wrote an article in The Guardian that said he was at the Cricketers, but then for later books he changed it to Central. So who knows what's going on there. Watch my video about it and you won't go far wrong, I say. More than reading John Ronson's book, I would have said. But what do I know? I'm not bitter. And the next one good about is also a Manchester. Manchester getting a lot of mentions here, and more than normal. And it's Alberto y los Trios Paranoias. Which is a take on a Paraguayan South American band, which I won't try and pronounce. The Manchester-based pranksters led by writer and music legend C.P. Lee were the Monty Python of punk-era rock. They released a song called Kill, parodied punk so well that most punks thought it was punk, and maybe it was. That they spoofed prog rock, they spoofed disco, they spoofed punk and even reggae, all with very good musical accuracy, I've got to say. Their full-length musical parody, I think it was called Sleek, was described as Rocky Horror meets Spinal Tap. And this was before Spinal Tap even existed, so go figure, as they say, especially across the pond and in Manchester, I would say. I think they once even took over the whole of the NME and filled it with fake reviews and fake articles about things and bands that didn't even exist. You see, that's like, the internet age thinks it's done everything, but no, it was done at the NME all those years ago. And that brings us on to another band which was led by a sounds journalist, and that is the Snivelling. I can't actually say the word because, believe it or not, in this day and age, you've got to be very careful on YouTube about swearing. If you say a swear word, then I found you don't get your video watched by as many people. Their name deserves a round of applause by itself. And they did shorten it later when they tried to be famous. They were founded and fronted by music journalist Giovanni Dadomi, sorry that's probably pronounced wrong, and also featured record producer Steve Lillywhite in the band, amongst other notables. They were a punk band with zero concern for radio play or public decency. Their song, I Can't Come, is exactly what you'd expect, except probably a bit better, to be honest with you. Raw, filthy, funny, and punk to the core, they only released a couple of tracks during their lifetime, but gained a cult status decades later. Giovanni unfortunately died early, I think in the 1990s, but he was a bit of a genius in his way. What this band was punk journalism turned into actual punk, with no filter and, well, frankly, no future, but plenty of laughs. These were the bands, 6 or 7 acts or bands that were different. They were oddball. They were the kind of thing I used to love. So thank you for watching, and if you want to see more of my videos, then the algorithm reckons you should watch that one next. Goodbye.